I didn't expect to find a job on Craigslist that night. Honestly, I wasn't even really looking. I was just scrolling through out of habit, killing time with a bowl of cereal and too many tabs open. But then I saw it. Tucked between someone selling a busted lawnmower and a post offering companionship with way too many winking emojis. Immediate overnight crew needed. Good pay, no experience required. It was in all caps. No logo, no contact name, just a few lines in bold red font that somehow looked louder than everything else on the page. Burger King, night shift only, start tonight. GPS may not work, must be able to follow instructions. That last line got under my skin. GPS may not work, who writes that in a job listing? Like they were daring you to even find the place. Everything about it screamed scam or worse. I should have scrolled right past, closed the tab, got some sleep. But I didn't. I remembered a Burger King like that from when I was a kid. One my dad took me to once, maybe twice, before it shut down. It was out past the reservoir, near that burned-out bait shop and the abandoned travel plaza. I remember cracked concrete, a broken swing set in the side lot, and a flickering crown sign that made my stomach twist even then. I was sure it had closed down years ago. Or maybe it just stopped showing up on maps. Either way, when I tried to look it up again, nothing came up. No address, no photos, no listing. Even Google Street View glitched out near the turnoff like the road didn't want to be remembered. But I remembered. That rusted sign with the faded crown. The weird half-hill behind the drive-thru that looked like something had burned there and never grew back. I remembered. I grabbed my keys. Don't ask me why. I needed the money. That's all I'll admit to. I took 2 wrong turns and lost signal twice, but I kept driving. The trees got thicker, the asphalt cracked, and then, just as I was about to turn around, I saw it again. That damned sign. Burger King, flickering above blackened windows. The neon buzzed low and slow like it was trying to whisper something. I sat in the car for a long time, engine idling, hands still on the wheel. There were no other cars in the lot. No light inside. The building looked like it hadn't served a customer in a decade, but the sign was on. I should have left, but I didn't. I stepped out, locked my car behind me, and walked to the door. The glass was dusty but intact. I raised my hand to knock, and before I even touched it, click, the lock slid open on its own. The door eased open a few inches, letting out a strange draft that hit me square in the face. It smelled like fryer grease layered over something sharper. Not rot, something clean, sterile almost. "Welcome to the team," a voice called from somewhere in the back. I stepped inside slowly. The lobby was dark, but I could see a dull yellow light coming from behind the kitchen's swinging doors. A tall man stepped through them like he'd been waiting for me. He wore a black polo. No logo, just the words Mason, Manager, on a faded name tag. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes looked sunken, like he hadn't slept in years. He didn't smile. "Clock's on the wall," he said, handing me a small cardboard time card. Then he passed me a laminated sheet. The title was printed in blocky red letters across the top. "Night shift rules, do not deviate." I scanned the rules quickly. 1. When the man with melted lips orders a Whopper with extra hot sauce and no ice in the drink, serve it with a steady hand and no questions. 2. If the girl in the red hoodie asks for chicken fries and a vanilla shake, quietly add a paper crown to her bag. 3. When someone stares at you silently from the counter, place a Hershey pie on tray 5 and walk away without meeting their eyes. 4. If an old woman asks for breakfast after midnight, make her a croissant sandwich and don't mention the time. 5. When the boy pays 7 nickels for a cheeseburger, give it to him and don't count the coins out loud. 6. If a silent car pulls up and says nothing, leave a bag of onion rings by the back door and close it without looking. 7. If the king walks in, stop everything. Do not speak and follow only if he points at you. 7 of them. All weird. All unsettling. Each one tied to a specific kind of customer. I raised my eyebrows, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank or hazing ritual. "Is this a joke?" I asked, almost laughing. Mason didn't blink. No, I waited for more. A smirk, a chuckle, anything. But he just turned and walked back into the kitchen without another word. I looked at the rules again. My fingers felt cold even though the place was warm. I don't know how to explain it. Just standing there reading those words, I felt like I had already agreed to something. Like walking through the door had sealed the deal. I found the punch clock and slid in the card. The machine stamped it with a loud clunk. The time appeared in red, not ink red, but blood red. Thick and shiny. The bell over the drive-through window rang. Mason's voice called out from the back. First customers here. And just like that, I was part of the night shift. The first thing I noticed was how quiet everything was. Not just regular quiet, the kind of stillness that presses in on you, like even the air is listening. The kitchen lights hummed faintly through the swinging doors, casting long shadows across the floor. I stood there for a second, staring at the punch clock like it might start bleeding. Then the drive-through bell rang again. Mason appeared beside me without making a sound. I didn't even hear the floor creak. "Handle this one yourself," he said, then stepped back into the shadows like he'd been swallowed. No explanation, no tips, just those 7 rules burning in my mind. I walked toward the headset hanging on the hook near the fryer line. My hands were already clammy, but I slid it on and tapped the button. The screen above the window flickered to life. I saw a dented red minivan parked under the busted menu board. The driver's window was down, and a man leaned out. His lips were melted, not just scarred, not burned, melted, like candle wax that had drooped and hardened in the wrong places. He opened his mouth, and I swear I heard his voice inside my head more than through the speaker. "1 Whopper," he rasped. "Hot sauce, no ice." 1. When the man with melted lips orders a Whopper with extra hot sauce and no ice in the drink, serve it with a steady hand and no questions. My heart was racing, but I moved. I didn't speak. I didn't hesitate. I made the Whopper exactly the way he asked, extra hot sauce, no ice in the Coke. When I turned to hand it out the window, Mason was there again, watching me from the kitchen doorway. I slid the bag across the counter without a word. The man took it slowly, his waxy hand brushing mine for a second too long. His skin felt soft. Too soft, like it might stick to me. Then he drove away. Mason nodded once and disappeared again. I took a deep breath and peeled off the headset. My legs felt like rubber. That couldn't have been real. None of this felt real. But I knew the moment I hesitated, things would go wrong. The bell above the lobby door jingled. I turned, just in time to see the door swing open on its own. A little girl stepped inside. She couldn't have been more than 10, maybe younger. She wore a red hoodie, the kind with the sleeves too long and the hem fraying at the edges. She walked straight up to the counter and looked up at me with wide brown eyes. "Chicken fries and a vanilla shake, please," she said softly. Rule 2. If the girl in the red hoodie asks for chicken fries and a vanilla shake, quietly add a paper crown to her bag. I grabbed the order bag and started filling it. Chicken fries. Vanilla shake from the machine that groaned like it was alive. My hands were shaking again, but I remembered the rule. I reached under the counter, pulled out one of the old paper crowns still wrapped in plastic, and slid it into the bag. When I handed it over, the girl smiled, wide and bright like the kind of smile you only see on birthday cards or old TV commercials. "Thank you for remembering," she said. Then she turned and walked straight through the wall. Not the door, not an exit. She walked directly into the tiled wall next to the window. There was no flash, no sound, just a flicker, like bad reception on a TV, and then she was gone. I backed away from the counter until I bumped into the soda fountain. My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't imagining this. I couldn't be. The crown wrapper was still on the counter. I looked up. A man stood at the counter. I hadn't heard the door open. I hadn't seen him walk in. He was just there. He didn't say a word, didn't blink, just stared at me with wide, empty eyes. Rule 3. When someone stares at you silently from the counter, place a Hershey pie on tray 5 and walk away without meeting their eyes. I fumbled through the dessert fridge and pulled out a Hershey's pie. My fingers were shaking so badly I dropped the first one. It splattered across the floor. I grabbed another and placed it on tray 5, the middle one on the far right. I didn't look up. I turned and walked into the kitchen, not even pretending to wipe my hands or check the fryer. When I looked back, he was gone. There were no footsteps, no chime. Just that same oppressive silence. By the time the hour passed, I had followed 3 rules, served 3 customers, and felt like my mind had been scraped raw. I found Mason leaning against the freezer, arms crossed. "You did fine," he said. "Who are they?" I asked. "What is this?" He just stared at me. Then he said, "You'll see," and walked away. The lobby lights flickered once. I swear I saw the girl in the red hoodie sitting in the corner booth for half a second before they blinked back to normal. I didn't check twice. There's a certain point where fear stops feeling sharp and just becomes part of the air you breathe. By midnight, I wasn't sure how long I'd been standing. My legs ached, and my brain felt like it was buffering. I kept replaying the girl's voice in my head. "Thank you for remembering." And the way she'd vanished like smoke through drywall. Nothing made sense, but the part of me that should have run was already slipping away. I stayed. I kept working, because that's what the rules were for. The bell above the lobby door jingled again. This time, it wasn't slow or dramatic, just a normal chime, like any old customer coming in for a late snack. But there was nothing normal about the woman who stepped through. She was old, maybe 80, maybe more, and moved slowly, using a cane with a rubber tip that squeaked against the floor. Her sweater looked handmade, patched in 3 places, and her white hair was curled just so. Like someone had done it for her, maybe decades ago, and time had just left it that way. She reached the counter and gave me a warm, almost nostalgic smile. "Can I get breakfast, sweetheart?" she asked. "Just a croissant sandwich and a coffee with milk." I froze, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I did. 4. If an old woman asks for breakfast after midnight, make her a croissant sandwich and don't mention the time. I glanced at the clock above the prep line. It read 12:08 a.m. Coming right up. The coffee machine hissed and spat like it was annoyed. The smell of fresh egg and sausage filled the air, oddly comforting. When I placed the tray in front of her, the woman smiled wider. "Thank you," she said softly. "I used to sit by the window with my husband, right there." She pointed to the corner booth, the same one where I'd seen the red hoodie flicker earlier. Every Saturday night after bingo, he loved the little hash browns. I didn't say anything, I just nodded. She picked up her tray and floated to the booth. Her feet never made a sound. The coffee didn't ripple, but she sat like she had weight, like she had presence. She looked out the window even though there was nothing out there but darkness. I glanced back at the counter when I heard the chime. A small boy now stood there, maybe 6 years old, wearing a windbreaker zipped up to his neck and jeans that were too short at the ankle. His hands were cupped around something. He didn't say anything. He just reached up and placed 7 nickels on the counter. He looked up at me with eyes that didn't blink. "Cheeseburger," he whispered. Rule 5. When the boy pays 7 nickels for a cheeseburger, give it to him, and don't count the coins out loud. I started assembling the burger. My fingers hesitated as I looked at the coins. I could swear there were only 6. I leaned in, counted silently once, twice, 6. I slid the cheeseburger across the counter anyway. He nodded once, scooped the coins into his pocket, and turned around. As he walked to the exit, I heard a strange sound, like distant knocking. Just once. Then silence. He opened the door and stepped outside. I followed out of instinct. There was no one there. No boy. No coins. No footprints. Only the parking lot lights buzzing above cracked pavement and a distant breeze that carried the faintest smell of old fryer oil. I went back in and found the old woman's booth empty. Her tray was gone. Her coffee, too. The booth seat was still warm. I walked back behind the counter and grabbed a cup of water from the soda machine, just to do something normal. I took one long sip before noticing something stuck under the lid of the ice bin. It was a photo. Faded. Water damaged, folded twice. I pulled it out and opened it carefully. It was a picture of a young couple sitting in that same booth. The man had glasses and was laughing mid-bite. The woman wore a handmade sweater with identical patches. They looked happy. The photo was dated July 1978. I tucked it under the register. The rules hadn't warned me about that part. They didn't mention the names or the stories, or how easily it all slips from weird shift into this place has teeth. When I turned around, Mason was standing just behind me. "Break time," he said. I jumped. He handed me a warm apple pie and pointed toward the hallway behind the kitchen. "You'll want to rest while you can," he added. "They're not the scary ones." "What?" He didn't answer. Just walked off again like his shoes never touched the floor. I sat in the break room, pie untouched in my hand, and stared at the stack of training pamphlets still peeking out from behind the microwave. My heart hadn't stopped racing since I clocked in, and somehow, I already knew the night was far from over. The break room was too quiet. No humming fridge, no flickering fluorescent lights, just the sound of my own breathing and the faint ticking of the wall clock, the kind with plastic hands and numbers that always looked slightly off-center. I sat there for a long time, pie untouched, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen tonight had some kind of explanation. Maybe the heat was messing with my head. Maybe I was hallucinating from stress. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, I kept coming back to the same thing. The girl had walked through a wall. The old woman had vanished. The boy had paid with 6 coins and left no trace. And I had followed the rules. I pushed the pie aside and stood up. The microwave sat crooked on a small metal cart against the wall. Behind it, wedged between a stack of unopened ketchup boxes and a dusty tin of coffee grounds, I spotted them. A row of old pamphlets tucked just out of view. I pulled one out. The cover was faded but intact, marked in dull red ink. Ritualized consumption and brand loyalty conditioning, internal use only. My stomach turned. I flipped it open. The first few pages were filled with strange diagrams, layouts of fast food counters overlaid with geometric symbols, spirals drawn beneath fryer lines, strange annotations like memory anchor location point A, and visual cue reinforcement via scent association. There was a section titled Controlled Repetition and Identity Dissolution. It described something called symbolic reinforcement through scripted transactions. Basically, the idea was that repeating the same phrases, movements, and rituals could eventually strip away a person's sense of individuality, turn them into something predictable, controllable. I turned the page. More symbols, more phrases, but they were warped versions of the Burger King slogans I grew up hearing. Stuff like, have it your way or else, flame grilled for obedience, smiles are offerings. There was a flowchart on the back that made me physically nauseous. It showed customer types categorized not by demographics, but by roles: the hungry, the watchers, the chosen, the rejected, the forgotten. Each had a path. Some ended in a little crown icon, others just stopped. I shoved the pamphlet into my bag. Then I looked back at the shelf. There were at least a dozen more, each with different titles. Consumer compliance through sensory entrapment, children as key ritual vessels, mascot interface, and hierarchical reinforcement. The dates on the spines ranged from 1972 to 1995. The company names kept changing. Burger King Holdings, something called C. Round Initiatives, and one just labeled MK King. I stepped back like the shelf might bite me. This wasn't just a haunted fast food joint, it was a test site. And they'd been doing this for decades. A sharp ding broke the silence. I jumped and nearly dropped the bag. The sound came from the front counter. Not the bell, not the door. Just something electronic, like a timer going off. I returned to the kitchen slowly, pamphlet still clutched under my arm. The lobby was empty, but the air felt heavier now, like I was being watched. I moved behind the counter and checked the screen above the drive-through window. Nothing. Then I saw it. A black sedan had pulled into the lot. Its lights were off, engine still running. It didn't approach the speaker box, didn't roll down a window, just idled there. The 6th rule buzzed in my head like static. If a silent car pulls up and says nothing, leave a bag of onion rings by the back door and close it without looking. I moved quickly, grabbed the bag, dropped in a fresh batch of onion rings. No napkins, no receipt. I walked toward the back door, which sat at the end of a narrow hallway lined with old mop buckets and rusted metal shelves. The hallway lights flickered. I reached for the knob, my fingers slick with sweat, and opened it just wide enough to place the bag outside. I didn't look. I shut it fast and locked the bolt, heart hammering in my chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it. Something shuffling on the other side. Snuffling. Clicking. A wet, dragging sound like claws against concrete. I backed away from the door and didn't stop until I was in the front again, both hands flat against the register counter. Mason stood by the fryer, arms crossed. "You didn't look," he said. "No," I whispered. "Good." I opened my mouth to ask what that thing was, what any of this was, but he was already walking away. That was when I noticed the lobby camera. It was pointing straight at me, little red light blinking. Except this time it wasn't moving, not panning, just fixed, watching. I grabbed a towel and covered it. I didn't care if Mason got mad, because it felt like the thing from the car was still watching me. I thought I'd felt fear before, but nothing prepared me for that hallway. Even with the door shut and locked, the sound of the thing outside echoed through my spine. I could still hear it, those dragging footsteps, the low, huffing breath just beyond the metal. I didn't even know if it had a face. I just knew Rule 6 had kept me alive. Back in the kitchen, I leaned over the prep counter and tried to calm my hands. Mason hadn't said a word since congratulating me, and when I finally looked around, I realized he wasn't there anymore. Again. I wasn't sure when he disappeared, but the silence he left behind felt colder than before. I took a deep breath and grabbed a mop just to keep myself busy. I figured if I kept moving, maybe my nerves would settle. Maybe it would all start to feel like a dream I could shake off in the morning. That was when the bell above the lobby door rang. I turned instinctively, expecting to see another impossible customer. But no one was there, no figure. Just the door swinging shut behind empty air. Then I heard the freezer door creak open in the back. I froze mid-step. The freezer was supposed to stay locked during the night shift. Mason had said nothing about it, but I'd noticed the thick padlock across the handle during my break. I hadn't touched it. No one had. I crept down the hall, past the break room, past the mop sink, until I reached the heavy steel door. It was ajar, just a few inches, and from the dark inside, I heard it. Knock. A single muffled knock. Then silence. No rule mentioned the freezer. No one told me what to do if it opened. But I wasn't about to improvise. I closed the door slowly, careful not to look inside. When the latch clicked back into place, I slipped the lock back on. I didn't want to know what knocked. I didn't want to find out what happened if someone answered. The intercom beeped overhead, making me jump. I ran back to the front and saw a new alert on the drive-thru screen. No car, just blackness. The camera feed was static, lines and flickers, like something was interfering, but the audio clicked on by itself, and I heard someone breathing. Long, slow inhales. Then the speaker crackled. "Is she ready?" The voice was wrong. It wasn't a question so much as a taste, like it was trying the words out for the first time. I slammed the mute button and yanked the headset off. The camera above the drive-thru windows sparked. Just a quick flash. Then it went dark. I reached under the counter and pulled out my phone, desperate to check the time, maybe even call someone. But there was still no signal. Just the loading icon spinning in a dead corner of the screen. I looked up, and the lobby was full of fog. It wasn't there before. It had crept in silently, pressing against the windows, crawling up the tile like a living thing. That's when the doorbell rang again. I didn't move, but the doors opened anyway. He stepped inside, the mascot. The king, not the cartoon version from the commercials, not the plastic smiling joke with the paper crown and the exaggerated chin. This one was tall, taller than the doorframe, and he ducked to enter. His cape was torn at the hem, his golden robe was stained with something darker than grease. His face looked like it had once been molded plastic, but now it was cracked, splintered. Something wet moved behind the eye holes. Everything went still. The fryer oil stopped bubbling, the lights stopped buzzing. Even the fog paused, hovering midair like it was afraid. Then the king moved, boots on tile, slow, heavy steps. He walked past the counter without looking at me, past the prep line, past the empty register. Then he stopped and pointed at me. Rule 7. If the king walks in, stop everything, do not speak, and follow only if he points at you. I didn't want to move, but I did. Not because I chose to, but because something inside me uncoiled and handed over the reins. My feet stepped forward, my hands hung limp, my lips pressed tight together as I followed him through the back of the kitchen, down a hallway I hadn't noticed before. We passed the fryer vents, which hissed like they were whispering. Then he opened a door I'd never seen. Inside was a small room, concrete walls, no lights, just a pedestal. And on that pedestal sat a single paper crown. He stepped aside and waited. I looked down at the crown. It looked old, faded, damp around the edges like it had soaked up something terrible over the years. I didn't want to touch it, but I did, and the second my fingers closed around it, everything changed. Something cracked open in my mind. It wasn't a sound I heard. It was a feeling, like someone tearing wallpaper off the inside of my skull. Memories that weren't mine surged up all at once, shoving their way into my head like they'd been waiting for years. I saw flashes, not dreams, not visions, recordings. A man tearing off his own face at the counter, screaming that he'd forgotten the order. A woman plunging her arms into the fryer, over and over, her voice boiling with the oil. A child trapped in the freezer, pounding once, just once, every night, always at 3:03. And somewhere beneath all of that, pamphlets, charts, data collection forms with words like compliance and sacrifice and cycle continuity must be intact. I stumbled back from the pedestal, crown still in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like my ribs were cracking. I didn't understand most of what I saw, but I didn't need to. This place wasn't haunted. It was built to be like this. A loop, a system, a machine wearing a fast food uniform. Behind me, the king stepped away from the wall. He didn't speak, he didn't gesture, but I felt the pressure of his presence guide me back through the door, like a tide pulling me out to sea. We walked together, back through the vent-lined hallway. The fog was gone now, the lobby was still, but the silence felt different, like something had been fed, and was now watching to see what I would do. When I stepped behind the counter again, the lights flickered once. The fryer hissed to life. The soda machine groaned. Everything resumed like I'd just taken a break. But Mason was gone. So was the line cook, who I now realized I'd only glimpsed once, maybe twice, from the corner of my eye. He had been there, hadn't he? The register dinged. The drive-through bell chimed. I looked at the clock above the kitchen doorway. 4:01 a.m., the shift wasn't over. So I put the crown down beside the register. And I kept going. The next customer pulled up to the speaker in a blue station wagon. A whole family sat inside, 2 adults in the front, 2 teens in the back. All of them had their mouths sewn shut, thick black thread looping through their lips pulled tight. They didn't speak, but the receipt printed automatically. 4 original chicken sandwiches, no drinks. I made the order and handed the bag out the window with shaking hands. The father took it with one stitched hand and gave a slight bow before driving off. Another ding. A man with no face stood at the counter, just smooth, pale skin where his eyes and mouth should have been. He raised one hand and pointed to the fountain machine. I got him a large Coke. He took it, bowed, and walked out. I didn't ask where they came from, or what they wanted. The rules didn't cover that part, they just covered the part I had to play. At 5:45 a.m. the bells stopped ringing, no more cars, no more footsteps. Just the fading glow of fluorescent light and the quiet whir of machines winding down. I clocked out. The time card slid from the machine, not red like before, gold. It shimmered faintly in the kitchen light. I didn't know what it meant, but I took it. When I stepped outside, the air felt different, cleaner, like a storm had passed, though there hadn't been rain. The cracked pavement of the parking lot steamed slightly in the dawn light. I got in my car and drove home. I didn't sleep when I got home. I didn't even shower. I just walked straight to my desk, sat down, and opened my laptop. The gold time card was still in my pocket. I kept running my thumb over the edge like it might tell me something, like it might hum with static or catch fire in my hand. It didn't. It just sat there. Perfect. Quiet. The same way the Burger King had been before the first bell rang. I opened my browser and typed in the address I thought I remembered. Nothing came up. Not even a pin. I tried Google Street View again. The road blurred out the moment I got near the turnoff, like someone had scrubbed it out frame by frame. So I tried something else. I dug into forums, old ones, dead ones, places with names like cursedsites.net and Fast Food Unreal. Half the links were broken, the rest were garbage. But eventually, in a thread titled Weird Burger King Off Route 22 Ohio, I found it. Just one post. No replies. Posted in 2011, user deleted. Project Crown, Behavioral Compliance Through Ritualized Consumer Environments. My heart started beating faster. The rest of the post was short, just bullet points. But they said enough. Established 1971 as compliance pilot site under CROWN initiatives. Closed and sealed, 1998 after personnel loss event. Ritual loops still active, customer types persistent. Do not engage. Control site no longer stable. Mascot icon may function as selector or recruiter. Avoid if seen. If chosen, assume role. Complete cycle. Replace prior manager. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. Assume role. Complete cycle. I felt cold all over, because I'd followed every rule. I'd seen the king, I'd touched the crown, and somewhere in that twisted framework of rituals and monsters and fake smiles, I'd done exactly what they were waiting for. The rules weren't there to protect me. They were there to shape me, condition me. I stood up too fast and knocked my chair over. My bedroom was dim, lit only by the weak gray of morning through half-shut blinds, and there on my nightstand sat the paper crown. I hadn't brought it home, but it was here, sitting neatly, waiting, like it had always been mine. I didn't pick it up, but I didn't throw it away either. I just stared at it. And somewhere deep inside me, I already knew I'd be back. Not because I wanted to, not because I had to, but because the cycle had already begun, and someone had to follow the rules.